Hello and welcome to Transformative Travel. I'm your host, Gary White, and with me, as usual, is my wife and co-host, Ellen Aviva. We're here in Évora, Portugal, and it's a lovely day here. It looks like it's nice outside.
Yes, I'm in the courtyard at Casa Morgado Esperão, and you can see the bougainvillea, which is growing more and more each week. And it's just a beautiful place to be. You may hear some road noise, I don't know. There may be some guests walking in behind me, but here we are. Glad to see you again.
Great. And our guest today is Ann Parker, who's coming to us from Boulder, Colorado. Can you tell us a bit about Ann?
Oh, I'd love to. I mean, Ann is a dear friend and a wonderful teacher. Ann Parker is a professor of eco-psychology and environmental studies at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, USA. She has lived with and learned from communities in the Himalayas, as well as Australian Aboriginal communities. She has also facilitated in-depth educational experiences for American students in Bhutan. Ann is both a long-term practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism and a Druid in the European Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. In addition, Ann studies sacred sites and consults on building harmonization and site design. She is a master builder and an expert in sacred geometry and earth energies. She is passionate about serving life and renewing our connection to and reverence for the living earth. Our salons are about transformative travel, which can take many forms. Last week, we talked with Ann about her deep immersion experiences with Australian Aborigines and in Bhutan. And we shared experiences at the Black Madonna shrines at Lyon and Rocamadour and Le Puy. This week, we will go into greater depth about the sacred geometry and earth energies. But we will begin by briefly revisiting what drew Ann to Lyon and how the Black Madonna called to me at Rocamadour. Then we will talk more about Stonehenge and Krukono in Brittany and go into greater depth at the Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and the Great Kiva in Aztec, New Mexico. We want to be sure to leave time for questions and answers at the end of the session, so I better get going here. One technological note, if you are tuned in from Gary's Facebook page, if you leave comments on the side, they will not show up in the live stream video. You have to be in the live stream video itself for the comments to be posted in live stream.
And yes, as always, and if you will type in your name and where you're located, we'll call some of those out as we go along. Well, shall we welcome Ann?
There she is. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
Coming to us from rainy, cold, tormentous Boulder, Colorado.
Thank you. Yeah, it's delightful to join you again, Gary and Ellen. I enjoyed our conversation last week, and I always love sharing thoughts with you. And also, I want to welcome to our guests, whether they're with us in this moment or we'll be watching later. It's delightful to connect and share ideas together in this way. And I love that our theme has been, or the theme of this series that Gary and Ellen are doing is about transformative travel. I think it's something that is. I see a hello from Mark Arend. So transformative travel has always been a passion for me, and it's just arisen in my life. And we wanted to pick up a bit where we left off last week and then go into our new topics that Ellen just mentioned. So one of the themes that emerged in this conversation was this clear idea of places as mentors and teachers. There's an active agency in our relationship to place. And this, resurfaces in this sense of this deeper quality of learning through transformative travel. And then another piece is the call of a place. And we noticed that in the role it played in the discussion about the Black Madonnas. I had this very vivid dream many years ago, and it was an unusual dream. It was like looking at a map. It wasn't sort of idealized or symbolized. And I woke up in the morning, and I looked furiously through an atlas until I discovered Lyon, a town in central eastern France. And I felt a call to go there. So ultimately, that led me to that place. And there I discovered the most sacred hill in all of France, as well as my first Black Madonna, who was a symbol of those great sacred places, energetic transformation in France. So I'm kind of summarizing quite a bit here that the middle-sized star over near Switzerland is where Lyon is. And this dream, you could say the call to the Black Madonna sites led me to my first Black Madonna site and then led me to explore this. And I want to add another piece about calling. Calling can be about healing. And this, I think for me, which I didn't mention last week, was a very deep kind of healing. It led me to the place of my ancestors, the Huguenots who were in that area. And they fled because they were given a choice of Catholicism or death. And they fled, to Holland and England and Canada.
And I'm just going to emphasize what you just said, which was how fascinating. You had a dream. It called you to a place you had never been. You went to that place and discovered something about your own, 400 years ago?
Maybe about
500 years ago, your own antecedents, your ancestors, and what had happened to them. And that was related to this place on which there is a shrine to the Black Madonna. And we said last week, I'm just going to say this much, that the Black Madonnas were not black by accident, it's by intention. And they have certain measurements that are important. And you can hear more about this if you listen to the recording from last week.
Yes, thank you, Ellen, because we're sort of summarizing quickly some of these themes that are so important in this quality of transformative travel. And so one thing that I'm adding to the story of the Black Madonnas now is that it was a call to a place, and the place was really significant in the way that people have seen the ancient landscapes and sacred places of France. So it was definitely a connection back to my ancestors. And it was also a quality of reparation, because I discovered as I did more research into my ancestors, there was some conflict there in the mid 1500s, early 1500s. And my ancestors, the Huguenots, tried to destroy the Black Madonna statues. And that meant that they were trying to cut off some of the older wisdom and knowing about the earth as they went into Protestant way, which tried to leave some of the more mystic qualities of the Catholic Church. So I actually was coming back to find the Black Madonnas, to find myself and to find my heart and my connection to my place and my land and my ancestors.
Oh my gosh.
Fascinating.
Oh, what a story. What a story.
Yeah.
Wow. And maybe briefly we can segue from that then to Rocamadour, because we were on a trip. Well, we were spending time visiting sites of Black Madonnas together, the three of us. And Rocamadour is in southwestern France. And that's a site, that's a picture of the hillside that is just, there's a village that climbs up the hillside, and there are various shrines there, including one to the very important Black Madonna of Rocamadour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say that hillside is, putting it mildly, it's more of a cliff, actually.
Yes, it is. It's a cliff. It's a cliff. And we were there,
Anyway,
and we were staying we were staying in a small hotel, and it was bedtime, and I was actually in bed, as was Gary, and I suddenly, we had seen her earlier in the day, and then the chapels all closed, and they locked them up, and it's nighttime. So there we were, and I was going to bed, and I heard this call, and she said, "Come see me." And I thought, what am I hearing? And she said, "Come see me." And I thought, I sort of nudged Gary, and I said, "Gary, I think the Black Madonna is calling me," which was totally weird to me. I'm not an aficionado of Black Madonnas. I'm not it's not my tradition. It's not my religious heritage, etc. And so,
and I said, I'm asleep.
You couldn't be bothered. So I got dressed, and I knocked next door on Anne's door, and Anne had just finished a shower. And I said, "Anne, I think I'm getting a call from the Black Madonna." She says, "Go see me," which makes no sense because the chapel will be closed. But Anne, a transformative traveler par excellence that she is, said, "Well, I'll come with you." So we wandered together through the dark streets of this little village, climbing up the road to the chapel, which was closed. And do you want to take it from there, Anne?
Right. Yeah. So I think that this is a story too, to sort of bring this lovely theme of the call to place. And I just decided Ellen is very intuitive. I thought, I'll just follow right along. So we walked in the darkness, and it was, everything was locked up. But as we approached near this church that you see the inside of here, suddenly a priest showed up with a key in his hand, followed by a whole bunch of young people he brought in the middle of the night to sing to the Black Madonna. And it's never open at night. But suddenly we were there. We just joined the young people and went in to see her in this spot. And this is one of these powerful spots we talked about last week, of powerful energies. And this was also an older goddess site, as are the Black Madonna sites, as we discussed last time. But, it was fun together to just sort of have some friends that actually want to go and do that with you and have trust and go. And,
I was totally blown away. I could go, what on earth just happened? It was this group of kids who were devoted to the Black Madonna, and they were singing songs in her honor as they processed through the street in some sort of mini pilgrimage and into the chapel that had been locked just a few minutes before. And we stood in the back just totally dumbfounded that we were actually there, and that somehow she had called me to be there, just to be there. Yeah. And as Anne says, the call of place, the call of the sacred, listening to one's intuition. I don't know what it's about. I've been following Black Madonnas ever since. I don't know what it's about, but I'm open to knowing more, to experiencing more.
Here's another comment from one of our
Peggy Moore.
Peggy Moore.
Yes.
Hi, Peggy.
And also, as Peggy did last week, she sent me an email, and I emailed her my article about the Black Madonna. So anybody, and others did too. So if anybody wants that article today as well to catch up on our story, as we then segue onto our next things. Yeah.
And this was also a segue into how you moved from being a profound Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, leading pilgrimages in Bhutan and so forth, to becoming a Druid in the European order of bards, Ovates, and Druids. So that's a whole nother pilgrimage of yours. Connected to place, and the calling of place.
Exactly. This this sort of follows with what I was saying earlier. There was this call to. I think the ancestors were calling me home, to find my own lineage. And it's not that I have learned so much from Tibetan Buddhism. It's not even funny. And as I said to some colleagues recently, they asked me a similar question not too long ago. And I said, you can't take the Dharma out of the girl or the girl out of the Dharma. This is not a either or thing. I've learned a great deal, but I didn't understand. I'm just going to tell a story that I've told. I was also telling those colleagues of mine, is that I didn't realize how I sought the wisdom of the world in India and among Tibetan Buddhist practitioners in the Himalayas. And I'm so grateful I did, but I also didn't realize how I was blocking my own awareness of the depth of my own ancestral lineage and places. And I say places because that has figured tremendously in my work in Europe. The best way I can do it is in a little story. And that story is that I went to study my ancestry in England also, and I visited Glastonbury because I knew it was the only sacred site I knew that language for, and so I visited there, and many, many amazing things happened there that really opened the doorway to Europe for me. It was like I went to a place that opened the doorway to understanding my ancestral relationship to places. And then a little later, traveling with a dear friend, I ended up on the coast of Cornwall, on the very eastern toe of England, facing the west. And the friend said, let's meditate. So she went to meditate, and I sat on the edge of a cliff, and I was looking west, the direction that my European ancestors understand that we go when we die. And so this idea of things folding into and out of form, so going to the west would be the passing out of form for the European ancestors of Western Europe. And so I was sitting there, and I thought, well, let's take this seriously. If I'm really here to see the ancestors, let's do it. So I meditated for a while and kind of got my busy traveler mind out of the way, in the sense of, where's the car, and what are we doing, and that kind of thing. And just was sitting there in the wind and the waves, and it was very beautiful. And then I just said, ancestors, I'm here. And I got a very clear statement, jump. It was like, oh, come on. I'm not really nuts, forget this is really dumb, And I said, let's meditate. I'm a meditator, so let's do it again, meditate. And then I got the second thing, jump. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to jump with my body. I'm going to jump with my spirit. And then in that moment, I understood that my ancestors knew the how to cross over into death as well as the Tibetans did. I thought that there were sort of wisdom teachings that the East had that my ancestors didn't know, but it was my blocking that let me not know. So it's like the Poa practice. I understood that they knew perfectly well how to unfold out of form there. So that's this calling became very deep, and the sacred places of Europe have become very dear mentors following all this.
Wow, that just gives me chills. Wow.
Yeah.
Ah. Whoa. Okay. Gary, would you put up Anne's email address before I forget, so that people can contact her to get a copy of the article she wrote about the research she was doing on Black Madonnas? There you go. Okay. And I guess we should now move, as we're transformingly traveling all over the place, and we're going back to origins and ancestors. What better place for some of us, perhaps, than to go back to the sacred lands of the Middle East and Jerusalem, this place that is so fractured and fought over,
Yeah.
and so powerfully sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And you have some interesting work that you want to share with us about the Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and so on.
Yes.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, and maybe I'll do a little forward statement. Is that we're exploring now a particular place, and I just want to let you know that as we have studied these places, we understand that the wisdom of building powerful human relationships to place exists in all of our ancestors. And it isn't just about the mathematics. It's about the being in relationship with the cycles of the sun and the cosmos as they make a pattern on the earth. And so while there may be mathematics in our book, which gives you the chance to use and make use of these sacred geometry principles, there's always this sense of the body as the main thing. Feeling is the most important, feeling the earth energies, and then magnified by the geometry sometimes of what people build. So this is accessible to all of us, whether we want to study it or just feel it when we go to a place. And I also want to say these energies it's not esoteric. It's not something that other people have and some people don't. All of us feel it. So I'm just inviting you into this idea that, what I'm going to talk about is relevant to you in that way, regardless of the detail in which you choose to address it.
Yeah, let me interrupt you for just 1 second, because
Yeah.
two things come to mind. One is to comment that you have several books that you've published that are accessible, some of which are specifically on earth energies, and we'll show those at the end of the video. And also that Gary has last year published a book on dowsing, which is an introduction to a guide to learning how to dowse. And he would say exactly the same thing. These are abilities and capabilities of sensorial abilities that we all have.
Sure, our ancestors had them, and we've allowed them to kind of atrophy.
Beautiful, yeah. Yeah, and Gary's book is a very nice, accessible entrance to this world of dowsing. So,
yes, we have well, when we were back in Arizona, we had an 80-year-old neighbor who she was interested in this sort of, so she got the book and she was learning how to do it.
Beautiful.
And it's like, yes, yeah. These are, as you point out so well, they're not other people's special gifts and abilities. I mean, some of us are more naturally able to access this or might become better at it, like being a musician, but it's not that you don't have those capabilities.
Yeah, beautiful. So I think I'm going to talk about I've chosen this case study because it's been really relevant in the news recently. So the Dome of the Rock, or the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, is this place in the most important place in the old city of Jerusalem. Now, many of us may feel like, oh, that's kind of far away and I don't really understand how I'm connected to it. So I want to sort of provoke our thinking a little bit about that. First of all, because we're speaking the English language, if I say the Holy Land, most people speaking or trained in the English language will know that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about Jerusalem, and especially the old city, because we, at some point in Europe, we exported our sense of sacred places over to here. So we didn't think anymore that we had those sacred places in Europe, but this was the place that people would go on long pilgrimages or crusades to. So we're all sort of connected here. And of course, this is a sacred place, a sacred location for people of Christian, Jewish, and Muslim beliefs. So it's a very powerful place, and it is considered to be the most contested piece of real estate in the world. Because when something goes off, like recently we had the bombing and rockets back and forth between Gaza and Israel, the tipping point, the moment of anger took place up by that up by the Dome of the Rock. There were some special events happening in the Jewish quarter, and the police came in and turned off the sound up near the mosque, so that the loud noise of the mujahideen, the singer up there, and they turned it off just for a little while. But that was a flashpoint. Now, that wasn't the problem with exactly doing that, but it's the flashpoint of the relationship over a long period of time. So I'm just giving you a bit of background. But this hill that the lovely mosque is sitting on, actually there's two there, is an old hill called Mount Moriah. So underneath all this human discourse around this place is a hill called Mount Moriah. So this was a holy hill, and the research I was able to dig up on this while I was spending some time in Jerusalem is that this was a hill from which the Canaanite people worshipped their sacred. They had their sacred prayers up there, and it's said to be connected with the Canaanite god Shalem, who is the god of creation, completeness, and the setting sun. And his counterpoint is, or his balancing partner is Sashar, the goddess of the dawn. So these were older languages of people on that hill, praying to the setting sun and the rising sun. And there was a relationship to nature and a relationship to this quality of sacredness on this hill, before the rest of our ancestors got there, so to speak. And it is the site of the first and second Jewish temples, which are important. So anybody who goes to Jerusalem wants to go to the Wailing Wall, is what it's called. And that wall is above this place where people are making their prayers and doing beautiful ceremonies. Up on top of there is the mosque that we saw, because it was no longer accessible. The Jewish temples had been destroyed, and this was built eventually on top in about 691 AD. This beautiful building that's there now. So it's a pretty impressive place in the sense that it magnetizes and literally brings people here from all over the world to go there as a sacred place. So just noticing the power of that place. And we can see the architecture is really important. It's an octagon. This is an example of some of the very earliest, really amazing sacred geometry building in the Islamic tradition. And the octagon was an important shape, and so that's part of what's going on here. So maybe we could look at the earth energies underneath. My story is hinting at there's something underneath here that everybody wanted to get to. So we see an activated spot. We see a crossing of water lines in blue, underground movement of water. And then we see these kind of red cracked lines, you could say, and they are the cracks on the earth, like small fault lines or movement of the earth. So in the language of sacred geometry, and I'm only trained in the Western tradition, but I've seen it in other places all around the world, that people choose activated sites for powerful buildings for transformative purposes. So you as a pilgrim go there. The energy is intense and transforming, aligning your body chakras, or shifting your energies in a way that helps renew you and remember your commitment to being a sane and compassionate human in this lifetime.
And I'm going to interrupt you. How did you get that drawing? How did you? How did you?
Okay, so in the on the ground version, when I was there, it was that earlier time period when there was some bombing and rockets going back and forth in 2014, and it's not easy to get a turn to go up there. You have to wait in long lines, and they may only let a certain number of people in. So I dressed appropriately, and I waited in a long line for about, I don't know, as long as a couple of weeks, and I finally got my turn to go in. And after that, it shut down because of the bombing. This was a previous version of the fight that we saw just 2 weeks ago or less. And when I got up there, I realized it's a very holy compound, and I shouldn't pull out my dowsing rods and look like I'm measuring anything. It would have been obnoxious, I felt. So I use my body instead. When you douse, you can use the body. It's hard if you're doing big buildings because it's a lot of body energy. But I walked slowly around this building several times. And first I was seeking the water lines, and then I was seeking the fire lines. And so I mapped them from the outside. And then now there's another way to do this, which most of us would have to learn a lot, but Dominique Suzanne's younger son sometimes can see things from a distance, see colors and patterns. And so he chipped in with the idea that these little lines I was mapping to the outside were a cracked rock pattern. You'll see in the picture that we're going to show you next, I hope, why this is quite a plausible analysis, but the water was pretty clear.
Okay, which picture do you want next?
The rock itself.
Oh, the rock itself. Okay,
so this is the rock, and you can see this is the rock about which so much of humanity has fought. And it has this kind of cracked morphology, sort of you can see some rectangular cracking kind of quality. And down deep, there may be more. The water lines are obviously moving underneath. There's also a very holy cave underneath, which is very rare to experience. But for those of Muslim faith. So what fascinates me is this is clearly a powerful place. The energies underneath and the shape of the buildings and the connection with the cosmos. So, what I want to suggest to you is that the rock and the relationship with the living earth and the cosmos is what's really the powerful thing. It isn't something we should fight over, to put it really simply. That we, all of humanity, this is our sacred place because it's a part of the earth and it's renewing to all beings. So I feel this way with each sacred place I go to, whether it's inside of a particular tradition or it's just out there in the earth, that whatever it is that people have loved and shared here at this spot is something we share deeply, regardless of language and other things.
And what I didn't understand before, looking at this picture, is that's actually the inside of that mosque.
Yes.
Looking down at a bare rock that is the center of the Dome of the Rock. I never put dome and rock together before to see to understand what that was.
And this is the rock that Muhammad was on his horse, was lifted up to heaven from this rock. And in Jewish tradition, this is where the Temple of Solomon and the first and second temples were, but it's also a place where was it Jacob? I don't know my history or my Bible. Slept with his head on a rock. And then for Christians, can you say more about the specifics of the rock in that regard?
The one story. So those are stories that I've heard that you're mentioning, or aspects of them, and so there's a lot of stories that connect with the rock. But the one that I know is that I've read about is that Muhammad appeared as a prophet, and he felt that he was sharing the next iteration of what needs to be spoken to humanity, and he asked his followers initially to do their prostrations to this location, to the Dome of the Rock. But then this is what I've heard, and it may be inaccurate here to some extent, but after he realized that the Christian world didn't see this as an unfolding of the same path, of knowing of the divine, he asked them to go to point to Mecca instead. And so this is
Mecca. I'm going to wander off here, but Mecca is the center. There is the Kaaba, which is this black rock that's encased in a huge silken calligraphy covered, I think it's a double cube, but I'm not sure, but it's immense. And on the side is, within a container, you can see this rock. Yes. And that is the center. It may be meteorite, they don't know, meteorite.
Exactly.
But again, we're on this theme of the sacredness of the place itself. Right. And rock.
Right. And the transformational experience of pilgrimage and going to, being called to and going to and transforming your life. So he had then asked them to focus on Mecca instead. And so Mecca is the most important, and then Medina, and then the third is Jerusalem. But it's still very deeply, it is deeply revered by, people of Muslim tradition. So it's so fascinating to me that hiding underneath all this really complex language, and I'm sorry to say so much fighting, we have this thing that we deeply share, all of us, with regard to our relationship to the earth and the cosmos and the divine therein, and the unfolding of all things, So
A huge piece of limestone with a limestone cave under it.
yeah. It's just fascinating to me. And I actually wrote an article, which I didn't actually end up publishing anywhere, but the title of the article was "A Pagan Returns," because I was coming back to find the older stories, the deeper stories, where we connect, with the essential nature of Earth and cosmos.
But some of the story, I'm just sitting here with my mind buzzing, and I wish I could remember things better. But because I'm sitting here remembering that several of the stories about the dome about the rock have to do with transformational travel in spirit. So you have Muhammad, the prophet, riding up to the heavens on a horse, and you have a Jewish prophet sleeping with his head on a rock there and having important visualizations. So I'm wondering about the capacity or the possibility of certain locations to encourage transformative dream travel or altered states of consciousness.
Well, there is, let's see, how do I say this? But there is discussion in indigenous traditions about certain places having certain kinds of qualities, and then going there when you need to, assist your health or work with other things. That's the place to go for this particular quality of realignment, you could say. And we talked about last time about the Earth is living, as we understand by the new science, is a living dynamic thing that we're part of. And another metaphor, I used a different metaphor last week, but this week is that like I might have a headache and I can massage myself generally, but if I knew an acupuncture point, I might be able to make a quicker connection with rebalancing. So that some sacred sites are active in that sense of, obviously, just by the data of people going there for centuries, lets us know that this is something useful to humans, to realign, to refresh, to reconsider, how it is to be human.
So back to the Dome of the Rock and the graph of the energy lines and the water lines underneath. So you're saying that the interaction of these fault lines and the water lines, which aren't necessarily on the same level at all, they can be at different levels, somehow generates some kind of earth energy experience that people could have there that would be different from outside the mosque, farther away from that rock.
Thank you for highlighting that, because like I said, these aren't esoteric things. They're things that are right in the middle of our relationship, to things around us. So our ancestors everywhere, when we study, this is one of the case studies in the book, our ancestors everywhere chose for these powerful places that they built on them or just practiced on. They chose these sites with movement of water underneath, movement of underground water, and fault lines, because it activates the energy. It's not something you want to sleep on, really, actually, or spend much time on, because it's a little too much for your body energy. Your house should be on somewhere that doesn't have that. But here, the great churches of Europe, I've studied the stupas in Bhutan and Nepal.
And you just published a book on that as well.
So these are what I call activating energies underneath. So everywhere around the world, people, and also the Mayan pyramids, I got a chance to check out in El Salvador. And our ancestors knew what they were doing. They were picking these energies where energy's moving, it's alive underneath. So that's the kind of underneath energy. It's like and then on top they would put the building, and that would be kind of magnifying the shape, or either a standing stone or a stone circle or a building that would sort of magnify and work with those energies. So they created tremendously transformative places on purpose. Even thousands of years ago, you're going to somewhere like Stonehenge, and your ancestors were laying this out for you so that you could actually transform your own body and being there. And somehow we didn't knock it over, thank goodness. And they knew what they were doing. So there's a darling picture of our beloved Stonehenge. So
But
yes, go ahead. Yeah.
and I was just thinking, Gary, could you get back to the mandala graph of the Dome of the Rock? Yeah, that one. So what you're saying, Anne, is that on top
Yeah.
of that flow of water and subterranean fault lines and all of that, that they've chosen to construct a building that is eight-sided for specific reasons, and they've oriented it in a certain way, and that the structure, the geometrical structure, the proportions and so forth, also magnify or harmonize or balance or take advantage of what's already there under the ground. Is that what you're saying? Am I saying
Yes,
that right?
yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. And the patterns that people built these buildings in are connected to what's called the solstitial quadrilateral, which is, if we stand in one spot, like let's say I wanted to build a building here, I would at that spot I would put a stick in there, and that's the center of where my building is going to be arranged around. I might put it right on top of a crossing of some of those water lines or whatever, and then I would wait till the summer solstice sunrise and put a stick in that angle, and the winter solstice sunrise, and then the sun sets, and I would end up with a rectangle that's very different at different latitudes. So up near Stonehenge, it might look more closer to a square, and down in, somewhere like El Salvador, it might look more like a longer rectangle because of the way the earth is shaped. And then people built off of these using this as the center of it, what are called natural mandala, a naturally unfolding mandala. And that's what's fun about it, because we can look at ancient sites and we can see that the ancestors knew what they were doing at the latitude, not just some ordinary generic angle. It's an angle that's related to the particular place. And so there's a lot of beauty in that connection to exactly the way we relate to the sun in that spot that's built into the ground
So it's sort of that wonderful Hermetic statement about as above, so below. You're mirroring the movement of the sun and the planet and the moon, and you're sort of marking that in a way here on the earth, and you're sort of building you're creating even more of a connection from as above, so below. And reverse as well, because you're honoring the movement of the planets and the moon and the sun at different times of the year. And so that's from below, so above.
Yeah, beautifully.
Here's a question that Anne has.
Hi,
How
Anne.
large is that sacred rock?
Well, I to be honest with you, I don't actually know. It's pretty big. I mean, that mosque takes a while to walk around, and it was walking slowly, and there was even a little bit of conflict going on at the time, so I was feeling a little edgy. But it's really large. I'm trying to think of a building that we would all know that would be a similar size.
Is it like a tennis court?
Oh no, it's much bigger. I mean, it's more like maybe like.
The rock itself is like a tennis court, or it's bigger?
Oh, well, of course, I couldn't see in the rock. I wasn't allowed in. But walking around the building, I would say it feels more like somewhere between 4 to 6 tennis courts. It's large. I mean, the building is quite large. We saw the picture, but it's hard to grasp. Maybe do we have any people in that picture? Could we see that picture again just for fun, so we could get Anne a bit of?
I
don't think there. Well, there are
there you
people
are.
there.
See how small those people are?
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. So it took me a while to walk around it. I mean, walking slowly. It was at least 20 minutes walking around. Slowly walking around.
And then the rock inside takes up about the space under the dome. Is that accurate?
But you can see that there's area around for you can see the area with rugs around it, so people could do some.
Yeah,
illustrations and so forth.
in this version, the stone
Oh, I
is
see it.
actually that irregular shape inside the second
Okay.
Yeah.
square from the outside.
See it. Yeah,
and
I
then
got
we
it.
see the area, that inner wall where people can maybe be doing prostrations or prayers or whatever they've chosen to reflect on that spot.
I may be taking this far afield again, but I'm thinking about the 8 in the octagon, and I'm thinking about how the Templars are supposed to have used the octagon, the Knights Templar, to have brought it back from the Dome of the Rock
Yeah.
design, and to have used it as a basis for some of their own churches that they built in Europe, and there must be some reason for that. That the octagon has special properties of some sort.
Yes, I mean, what I've heard too, it seems to be reasonably well recorded, is that the Knights Templar, were the people sort of protecting and financing people's pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and they also they had played a big role of trying to. It was a lot of still at that point conflict going on around who could be in charge of this area, and they did bring back a lot of the sacred geometry at that time, and they did bring back the octagon. Now, what's interesting is that the octagon of place. Oh, she's got it. Look at that.
Oh, good. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. Teamwork.
So it's
Exactly.
65 feet
But
long.
That's what Google says.
The stone is 65 feet long, Peggy, or is that the diameter of the? No, it'd have to be the stone because that's.
I think
yeah.
it would be the
Okay.
stone.
Thank you.
yeah, that's great. I'm glad we're interacting. It's fun. So they did bring back the octagon. Now, the only thing I want to give a proviso regarding active sacred geometry is that you need to get the octagon of the place. That's why people build. They don't build just putting an octagon somewhere could be nice, but you want it to be in an area where it actually fits with the latitude, and it doesn't fit with the latitude here. It's a pentagon, so but there's many other features in that building that reflect the social quadrilateral of the Jerusalem latitude.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. And so we don't want to shapes are great, but we want to make sure we're actually doing harmonious things. But here they managed to use their favorite shape and do a whole lot of things in the building that make it shape to the latitude, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Well, and you talk about this in your book on Earth energies.
Well, in the Earth Energies books, we focus on the Earth Energies, the things we've been talking about, the activating energies and how to work with them. But in the Secrets of Sacred Geometry book,
Okay.
Co-authored with me, Dominique, and Karen, we have these case studies, but we also give you the tools to understand how you could understand what the latitude of place would be and how to work with it. So you could take. We're not necessarily having a class today on sacred geometry, but we're indicating how interesting it is and how useful it is to the body and even to the traveler and the one who experiences it. But the book can get you into the practical zone of even building the right little shape for your garden in the backyard if you like.
Well, what I have up there right now, the squares are actually the solstitial quadrilateral for Jerusalem, isn't it? Those squares?
Well, no, what happens with the solstitial quadrilateral is you end up with something called the mother square, where there's, which is maybe more elaborate since we don't have pictures of it, but
Okay.
but there are many angles and extra things going on here, and some of the circles that were hit, the circles of why they put the octagon. If you put the octagon in a certain circle, you're hitting a certain kind of energetic pattern, and that's why I call them natural mandalas. It's a sort of a pattern that appears on the earth when we start to stake out a sacred spot. It's almost like if you drop a stone into the water, it makes a certain wavelength of patterns.
Ripples, yeah.
So they did a lot here to harmonize this building with the latitude. In many ways, they're sort of more hidden. Oh, it's a diameter of the stone.
Peggy says diameter of the
Thank
stone.
you, Peggy.
Yeah. So what I felt when I walked around the building, and then which contained the stone, the compound had this fascinating mix to me of deep peacefulness. It's a living site. It's not one that's been a tourist site. If it makes sense, you can feel the profound quality of it. And then at the same time, there was a little bit of conflict going on between some tourists and some people who were looking after the compound. So it felt this kind of edgy thing at the same time. And maybe that characterizes this spot, is that we've loved it. If only we could slow down and just be peaceful at it together, it would be the teacher we need, for the Middle East. But at least we could honor the heritage of all humanities is there, as it is in sacred sites around the world.
From your mouth to the goddess's ears, as a friend of mine used to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, many sacred sites have been fought over or conquered over, or, there's some way that humanity has seen that as a way to take over each other's relationship to source somehow.
Which shows how powerful they are. I mean, it's recognized. They're not just objects. I mean, they're very, very powerful. And how wonderful it would be if we could use that energy for peace instead of for fragmentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I see Gary's putting up. We
There's
said
the Great Kiva.
we promised you would talk about the Great Kiva in Aztec, New Mexico, and
Right,
we
and I
want to
think-
have time for questions. So we've got about 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
okay, and people can ask questions too as we do this. I wanted to pick 2 of the case studies from the book, because this idea of sacred sites being powerful, being places that people have gone through in the past and done transformative ritual or ceremony, and this underlying knowledge of humanity about this sort of deep level of transformative travel. And I wanted to pick one because I'm here in Colorado, and this is not too far away. This is the Great Kiva, and it's in Aztec, New Mexico. Now, that was a mistake. The early Europeans who got there thought it was Aztec, but it's not. This is the Chacoan culture, like Chaco Canyon, but it's the most northern piece of that Chacoan culture, which is just stunning. I mean, the work done in Chaco Canyon is mind-blasting. And it was these would be the place of ancestral Puebloan peoples. And this is one that, because it was done early on, it was a rebuilding of the biggest kiva in this community. Behind me is a whole big pueblo. Behind this picture is a whole big pueblo with many, many, many kivas, family kivas, maybe smaller, larger, some other subgroupings, and then this is the biggest one. So it was kind of manhandled archaeologically, but it is the structure there. And it was built. Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Kivas are the traditional sacred ceremonial construction for a number of Puebloan people, correct?
Yes, and at this time,
And they're usually underground?
yes, it's underground, or this one you can see it's semi-submerged.
Okay.
And so, I don't claim to have any expertise in it, but these were places, I suspect, of ritual and community ritual gathering and work to get collective work together. And when we studied this one, it's just stunning. I mean, the people who built this knew how to use all of these elements of the latitude, the solstitial quadrilateral. They chose certain circles of the natural mandala, like the circle of ether for the inner wall. And then at the center, when you build a really powerful structure like this, you get a big vortex in the middle, a big energy vortex in the middle. And it's also, as I walked around it, I was confused about what was happening, what kind of energy was happening here. And I found that there was water there converging, like water was coming together and then going down into the earth, right into where that kiva was built on top of. So they picked an energy spot that was really powerful. Many churches have ones that are upwelling, but a spring is coming up and it's spreading out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna put my hands in, it's kind of up and spreading out. But this one had water that was going down. And so that it's a blind source that was converging. It didn't come to the surface. And it created a lemniscate, this pattern. I should have drawn a picture of the lemniscate, but it's...
Isn't a lemniscate like a figure 8 on its side?
Right. So if you lay a figure 8 down on its side and then lay a bunch of other figure 8s around, you get kind of a blossom. There's figure 8s in pattern.
Yes.
And so as I walked around the outside, I was kind of curious, but it turned out to be a lemniscate. And the first time I found a lemniscate was on the stupa of Swayambhunath in Nepal. And I was so freaked out because I measured all the earth energies one day, took my notes and went home. And I went back the next day and the energies were moving a different direction. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is alive. I was a little bit wigged out about it. But then I learned, this was something I was so wigged out, I emailed Dominique, what is this? Help! And very sweet. He said, this is a sign of a great, beautifully designed and located sacred site, because they're using all those energies below in a powerful way. And then the building itself, magnifies it and expresses those. So it's kind of like a living, pulsing energy. So, like if you had a figure eight, and then you had another figure eight, another figure eight, you end up with a circle of figure eights kind of tied to the middle, you know. So this means that, you know, even in the United States, where we don't sometimes think we have ancient buildings, we do. We just didn't know we didn't treat them well. You know, this is one that was rebuilt, but there are many, many kivas. And the kivas that were behind that picture, all the kivas for the families and the smaller groups, they were all crossing of water lines or other things. So that each of those little kivas had a simpler energy under it, but they were all activated. They weren't randomly placed at all. And for those of you who aren't aware of the Chaco and the work in Chaco Canyon of the Solstice Project, it's really beautiful because an art historian went to look at this vast array of kivas over a huge amount of landscape. And she was a little, she discovered that they might somehow have to do with the solstices and the solstices. That's why it's called the Solstice Project. And she brought in a lot of scientists, and they spent a long time rediscovering what I've been telling you that our ancient ancestors knew about the alignments of the sun and the moon. And in their case, they didn't work with the earth energies particularly, but they understood that the cosmic aspect they retrofitted because science has lost that. But it's fun that even in our area of Colorado, for those of you who are around the West, you know, it's a place you can go and experience these energies yourself. So it's not just a story, you know, it's a place that you can feel.
Gary, would you get back yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think maybe that's enough on the case study, but we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing, which is what you're pointing out, is that this knowledge of the ancient master builders, which you're one, and Dominique Susani and Karen Crowley Susani, and your books talk about, but that this work is all over the world. It's not unique to, you know, European predecessors or, I mean, you have it in Bhutan, you have it in Native American, indigenous people's buildings here. So people knew these things. They knew it, and we've forgotten.
Yeah. And it invites a kind of a new wave of transformative travel to, with curiosity and care to protect these ancient sites and to visit them and see what we learn from them.
So when you visit sacred, if there are no questions, I'll just keep talking to you.
Okay.
So far, there are no questions.
Okay.
If you want to ask questions, type it into the comments box.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I mean, Gary and I have written a series of books called Powerful Places in ... Cornwall and Brittany and Malta and the Celtic countries, basically. But knowing how to approach a place, to experience it, to center yourself, to ask permission to enter, I mean, we give a whole sort of a short list of ways to become present to a place, which I'm sure you also teach people when you lead them on transformational travels.
Yes, and why don't you say yours? Your acronym is kind of cute. I think that'll be fun for people because, this quality of arriving with humility and reverence and openness and connecting to the land and feeling the energies and then engaging in, relationship rituals that build the dynamic and then just simply being open to the wisdom. But I like your acronym. Could you do it?
No, I can't remember.
we can email it out.
No.
But it's a lovely acronym. But this idea is, kind of what I was saying.
I think it was blessings, but I can't quite remember what it was. But and of course also the idea always of being grateful to be there and of not causing any harm to the site. It's really a problem when people think, oh, I'm doing favor, I'm honoring the place by leaving candles burning or stuff like that. Certainly not to leave trash or anything else, but even more subtly, you can leave energetic remnants behind that really don't serve the place or the people who come after you.
Leave crystals behind.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because we had, I shared with you my favorite term last week of these are transformatories. They're meant to transform and support the human being and other life forms as well. It harmonizes the whole area. And in that sense, we need to sort of enter with openness because we can learn a lot when we're open. If we're there busy taking pictures and kind of having well, what am I going to have for lunch? I mean, lunch is nice, but if you're open, you might receive some information, that deepens your learning, because these are teacher places. So we want to listen to the teachers, the mentors.
I remember we were at a megalithic site on a moor in Devon years ago, and we came down this hill, and I was somehow in an altered space, in an altered mind, and it was just this amazing sight. And as we're getting close to it, there was a family with some kids, and they were using it as a picnic grounds.
It was a picnic going on.
Yeah, and I mean, part of me was going, well, they're appreciating the place. I mean, they're glad to be here, and I didn't want to be a big heavy about it. But on the other hand, I thought there was this ancient part of me that was just wanted to scream at them about, you can't do this to this place. Would you have a picnic inside of a cathedral? I mean, I just wanted to, I was just outraged. I mean, it was just so weird.
Yeah, so a sense of
it was that sense of, this is a sacred site. And even if it doesn't look like what you think of as a church, or a sacred site that you're familiar with, a mosque or a synagogue, it's a sacred site, and it was used for ceremony, and it should be respected.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because in that earlier story about like looking for my ancestry calling and looking for things, and I didn't know where to go at the very beginning, and that's when I went to Glastonbury, which we were talking about earlier, and you don't really understand. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So I went to we went with my friend to Glastonbury, and we ended up just by good luck getting a B&B, and we asked this woman who had the B&B. She said, it's high season, and I've got all booked out, but there's two people. If they don't come tonight, you can have the room. So we waited, and she was giving us tea, and I said to her, I said, I got an email just 2 weeks ago before I came that this is the first government recognized goddess temple in 1500 years in England. Do you know where it is? And she was really quiet for a while, and she was just making the tea. And then she looked at us for a long time. And then she said, I'm a key holder, and I'll take you there. And so it was just like magically finding the right person. She took us there, and it wasn't open to the public a lot at that time. Now it's different, but it was only open on Sunday for 5 minutes or something. So she took us there, and she was in there, and there was a statue of the goddess woven out of reeds, it was into and out of her body at the same time. And I was just sort of hypnotized with it. And I was looking at it, and I said, why is she made out of reeds? I'd never seen a statue like this before. And she said, look out the window. She said, now the coast is like 30 miles away, but this was flooded. This was the Isle of Avalon.
Oh, yes.
And then it was like, I have a living lineage. Those aren't sort of bullshit old stories. They're hiding what was known, that this was a profound sacred place of transformation. And the reeds, of course, were from the marshlands and that sort of thing. So you could see into. So again, there's that sense of like suddenly somebody let me know that my ancestry was alive in a way that I hadn't dreamed, and I didn't get what sacred sites at all were in Europe. So Glastonbury was the first teacher. Yeah.
Well, I'm aware that time is passing, and we're about at the hour.
Yes.
Would you show that slide of Anne's books? It doesn't have the Bhutan book in it, but it has 4 of them. And you said Anne's Stories from the Origin, get that on Lulu, not at Amazon?
Stories from the Origin, the best version of the Aboriginal stories is from lulu.com. And Earth Alchemy and Secrets of Sacred Geometry are on Amazon. And then the last one is a little unusual. It's from the Himal Press in Nepal, multi-ethnic interface in Eastern Nepal. So just in case, that's a different sort of subject than we've discussed today. Yeah.
And the Bhutan book is an analysis of stupas in Bhutan, right?
Yes, it's analysis. It's a very rare opportunity to have a discourse between 2 ancient traditions. And the first time that people were allowed, anybody from outside Bhutan was allowed to study the stupas. My beautiful Bhutanese colleague, Tsering Chodin, and I, and Dominique Zani worked as a team, and we were allowed to do that because of her special efforts to make this happen. And the book is supposed to be being mailed to me, so if somebody really wants that book, they should have to get on my list, because it's taking a really long time to get here from Bhutan.
So it's not available on Amazon?
No, not yet. And it's not going to be very soon, so it'll have to be a personal relationship that we'll get that.
Okay.
Hey, Mark.
Here's,
Nice to
here's
see
a
you, Mark.
comment.
So we are closing. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I will post the acronym blessing and what it meant. And anything else that I couldn't remember at the moment. I'll post that when we are posting this, which will be, it is recorded and it will be available. And if you register on Gary's YouTube channel, you should get notifications for future announcements, right?
Yes.
Future.
Yes.
And if you have anybody you'd like us to interview, including yourself, whoever you are out there, just send us an email
Just suggest.
to,
Exactly.
and what's our email, honey? It'll show,
You want my our email?
well, you can email me, my name, ellenaviva@aol.com.
I'll get it
Yeah.
up somewhere here.
It's okay.
I can't find it right now.
It's okay.
So, but anyway, I just want to say it's always delightful to talk to you both, my dear friends, and all the friends that have joined us here or in future as they listen to the recording. So thank you for this special moment. Hey, Bob. Nice
Oh.
to see you.
Thank you. Well, Anne, it's always a pleasure. We had so much more we can talk about. We can talk about bilocation and
Well, we'll have to do this again.
Australian Native people and how that compared to Tibetan Buddhist practitioners. And we'll meet again. We'll have another
Okay.
conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. Okay, bye for now.
Bye for now.